Good day, and thank you for tuning in 3D, the Daily Divine Direction broadcast. For all of our new listeners and viewers who are tuning in for the very first time, I'm Pastor Pope, and thank you for allowing us to come into your viewing environment. We are here with you, live broadcasting from the FijiWater.com sponsored studio every Monday through Friday from 12:30 p.m. until 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time to discuss whatever topics you might like to discuss, whatever issues of life you find challenging or that you find difficult to navigate. We are here because God is concerned about that which concerns you. And so we are here in 3D, the Daily Divine Direction broadcast, which is brought to you daily by Fiji Water, Earth's finest water. You may already know that Fiji water comes from Fiji. However, did you know that it is created by nature? It is untouched by man. It starts as a tropical rainfall which slowly filters through layers of volcanic rock, where the water collects in a natural, sustainable artesian aquifer where it is bottled right at the source, free from human contact until you unscrew the blue cap. Fiji Water, Earth's finest water, will be delivered right to your front door when you subscribe for delivery, and you'll save money at FijiWater.com. And today is National Hydration Day. So make certain that you order Earth's finest water from FijiWater.com. I'm going to say to all of our listeners and viewers, we want to remind everyone that we are Facebook Live, we're YouTube Live, we are RadioFreeNetwork.com Live. If you go to RadioFreeNetwork.com, click on radio, you will find a link for New Life where you will find all of the broadcasts for the Daily Divine Direction broadcast. 3D is scheduled every Monday through Friday from 12:30 p.m. until 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So tune in. You don't want to miss this. And of course, if you're on RadioFreeNetwork.com, you can click on the WKAP link where you will hear our 24-hour internet radio station where we play music that will encourage you, empower you, and inspire you to be the best version of ourselves that we can possibly become. We don't want you to miss it. Stay tuned in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to all of the music that will bless your spirit and keep you inspired. We thank you for tuning in every day at 3D, the Daily Divine Direction broadcast. And of course, I'm going to begin today by addressing a communication that came in from one of our listeners and viewers who indicated that you have been in a relationship with a man for the last 5 years. You say you live 3 hours apart by automobile. However, you see each other every weekend. Either you go to him or he comes to you, and you talk and text daily, and you said suddenly you do not. So let me say this. You've got to understand something here. And we've talked about the method of dating now, that there is a much more effective and efficient revelation from God for the purpose of dating. Dating should be a mission. It really should be you dating on a mission. And let me make sure everybody's clear on this, because I want to address you, but I also want it to benefit our listeners and viewers. So for all this time, you've been going back and forth for, the last 5 years. And you're 3 hours apart. So you're going back and forth by car every weekend. At some point in time, the man in the relationship should have made a decision that we're going to eliminate this from our lifestyle, because you're not being effective and you're not being efficient. What's happened is that you both have been doing this for so long that it's become part of your life and your lifestyle. We have to manage our lifestyle more effectively and efficiently. So when I say that, what that means is he's the man, he's the head, he's the lead. Now, I realize the two of you are not married, but you've been in this relationship, this long distance relationship, but not so long distance that it's not bearable for the two of you. So I'm going to walk you through the whole scenario of what you're doing, which is every Friday, one of you leaves to travel to the other. And then you spend the weekend together, and every Sunday, one of you gets back in the car and departs and returns to your place of residence. The problem with that is that the two of you entered it, first of all, with not a long-term plan. You entered it with a short-term plan that turned into a long-term plan. And as the man, he should have made a decision that one of you in the last 4 years, so you've been in a relationship for 5, 1 year into this, he should have made a decision that you two are going to eliminate this from your lifestyle. In other words, if this is going to be long-term, either he needs to look for, and both of you should be looking for a position that could bring you together in one geographical location. If this was going to be a relationship that would end in marriage, not a relationship that you'd be in now for 5 years. And two of those were COVID. So think about this. Because you were able to drive to one another, it was fine because you were able to get in your car and not have to worry about, being contaminated, for lack of a better term, by others. But for 2 years during COVID, you did this also. You've got to really think about what's happened over time. And what's happened over time is, you've been together every weekend, you talk and text every day. Now suddenly you don't. Suddenly you talk a couple of times during the week. You might text a couple of times during the week. And what's going to happen eventually is those weekend runs are going to begin to be less frequent also, because now the relationship's coming to an end. You don't know it yet. He doesn't really know for sure, but the relationship is coming to an end. You all have invested 5 years of your life, and that's why you don't want to get out. But you're never going to maximize the return on that investment. You're not. And so what you two have to do is find out if you can go your separate ways and at least maintain civility. Don't get to a point where, it becomes an argument about you're not calling, you're not texting, you're not coming, because eventually you're not going to be going back and forth to see one another every week. Don't let it get to that place, because no one needs toxicity in their life. What the two of you should say is, we've been doing this for 5 years, we've done it 2 years through COVID. It's time for us. Listen, you may or may not feel you've gotten the return on the investment of the 5 years you put in. And what I mean by that is, there's been some good moments, there's been some moments where they haven't been bad, but you felt like there was something missing, and the reason is because there was something missing. Every relationship needs to maximize the return on investment. If you cannot maximize the return on investment, and all you're getting is a return on the investment, it's not going to end and begin in marriage. In other words, the relationship come to an end and begin in the marriage. And that's not for everyone. There are exceptions to the rule, but the reality is the rule is the rule. If you've gone for a long period of time in a relationship and the relationship does not end or begin in marriage, it's either going to be what it is or it's going to come to an end. I realize that there are people, like I said, there's exceptions to every rule, but not in your age group. Okay, there's exceptions to every rule, meaning that people who are older get into a relationship, they're both in their own lifestyle, they're comfortable in their own lifestyle, and bringing it together would cause more disruption than peace. I get it, because there's a lot of variables in relationships, but not in your case. You know, you're both at an age where you're young enough to make a new investment and maximize the return on that investment. You're capable of doing that, and you should. And the reason is because at the end of the day, we all should be looking to maximize the return on the investment of our time that we put in to a relationship. Now you might say, well, Pastor Pope, I'm 5 years into this. I need to really, I need to get a return on the investment. Well, the return on the investment that you have is that you've had a good relationship with someone who's a decent human being. You all are you went into this without a long-term plan. Remember, I talk about 7 years, 14 years, and 21 years. You went into it without a long-term plan. You had a plan, and the plan was, we're going to see each other every weekend. We're going to talk and text during the week. That's a short-term plan. And that's the reason that you're not even going to make it through the 7-year plan. Now you've suddenly stopped with the communication. Eventually, the visits will cease. Because this was not structured within the will of God. This was structured within the will of man. We're going to have a good time. We're going to hang out. We're going to do what young people do, and this is the result. One of the things that we really, now I want to speak to everyone, one of the things that we really have to focus on is really getting a better understanding of what we need to do to maximize our quality of life. You know, certainly we want to, both personally and professionally, we want to maximize our careers. We want to maximize, we want to experience the fullness of God, but we also have to maximize the fullness of God. And we have to work to that end. You know, I've talked about this. You know, we experience success personally and professionally because we're working, we're building a life, and then we have to, watch this, we enter into that phase where we experience a better quality of life. And what does that look like? We experience the fullness of God. But then we have to learn to maximize that. And that means from generation into generation. But most people don't think that far ahead. Most people are only thinking for a short period of time. That's one of the worst things that ever happened in the corporate environment, is that, and I understand why they did it, because most people can't think beyond that. It's kind of like, you know, even though there's commands throughout the Bible, God gave us the 10 commandments, and the reason I always say this is because he gave us 10 fingers, gave us 10 toes in most cases, and he knew we couldn't handle more than that, because that's all we can handle in both hands. That's why they were written on 2 tablets. That's all we can handle in both hands. And the reality is that the worst thing that the corporate environment did to people was to say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, if that's all I have to look forward to, that's a problem. Because I shouldn't be looking for just 5 years out. But they did that because they knew people really weren't in the thought process of thinking beyond the 5 years. And that's the reason that I'm constantly teaching people to develop a 7-year plan, which is your short-term plan, a 14-year plan, which is your midterm plan, and a 21-year plan, which is your long-term plan. Now, that will take you to a point where then you can begin to build on that. 28 years, 35 years, you know, we've got to, 42 years, we've got to do better than just thinking about the next 5 years. And that's what happened in your relationship. You've had a 5-year plan. You didn't know it, and neither of you called it that, but that's all you had. Let's go back and forth. Let's text and talk every week, and we'll have a good time. Well, that's what you've had. A good time, but that good time is coming to an end, because eventually you get worn out. And then on top of that, you got to take into consideration that as the 5 years have gone by, you both have gotten older. So you may not have grown at the same pace. One of you may have outgrown the other. Those things happen. But we've got to do a better job in really structuring our lives that are going to take us to the place that God has purposed for our lives and not the place we want to go in our lives. This segment of the broadcast is brought to you by T-Mobile, America's largest, fastest, and most reliable 5G provider at no extra charge. So if you're not currently a T-Mobile customer, you may call or text on the T-Mobile call or text line at 267-992-1424. We will move you into our queue so that you may become a T-Mobile customer and experience America's largest, fastest, and most reliable 5G provider at no extra charge. Taxes and fees are included in your bill, and if you attach a credit card to your account, you will receive a discount on your monthly bill. At T-Mobile, America's largest, fastest, and most reliable 5G provider at no extra charge. I'm going to address another communication that came in from one of our listeners and viewers who indicated that the people in your life are not consistent and you have difficulty coming to terms with that. You want to know, how do you deal with the emotions of what you identified as betrayal? So let me say this to you. You know, consistency and longevity are two of the keys to success. You can't have a successful relationship with people who are inconsistent. You can have a relationship, you can know them, you can love them, but you can't have a long-term sustainable relationship with people who are consistent. And let me explain what that means. If they're family members, you're going to have to deal with them at some point in time, whether it's just at family outings. But that doesn't mean that they have to be involved in your daily life. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is what I often encourage people to do, and that is, first and foremost, you've got to take the emotions out of the equation. You've got to decide that I'm not going to allow my emotions to be inflamed by what you've identified as betrayal, but it's really just them being inconsistent. So think about this. The reason you're having difficulty dealing with it is because you pride yourself in being consistent. And when I mean by that, I'm not saying you're puffed up, but what I'm saying is you're committed. And that's what I mean when I say pride yourself. You're committed to being consistent in every aspect of your life, personally and professionally. You live to be consistent. That's going to be one of your keys to your lifetime success. Everyone doesn't have that gene. And what I mean by that is, everyone hasn't developed that behavior. You know, it's one thing to be from a gene pool, but when you see people, let me give an example. You have family members who have the same DNA that you have. And even though they come from the same gene pool, they may not have the same behavioral gene. So you have to really take the emotion out of the equation, and you may have to say to yourself, okay, they're not going to be consistent because that's just not who they've become. But you have decided that you want everything in your life to be consistent. And if you're not going to be consistent, then you just have to love them from afar. You don't have to engage with them every single day. You don't have to deal with them every single day. You don't have to allow them to be in your environment consistently. You just have to deal with them on your own terms. And so this is what I want to say to all of our listeners and viewers. When you find that there are people in your life who are inconsistent, deal with them on your own terms. Decide how you want to deal with them. Decide when you want to deal with them. And once you have made those determinations, implement your strategy. I'm going to deal with you at family holidays. I'm going to deal with you by checking in with you once a week. I'm going to deal with you on my own terms because I know who you are. And when people show you who they are, you've got to believe them. That's an old adage that we all should understand. That when you are dealing with others, you have to deal with them on your own terms because everyone else brings their own personality to the environment. You have to decide whether or not you want to allow their personality to disrupt your environment. You have to decide whether or not you want their personality to be a factor in your day-to-day life. And the reality is that you're in control of that. You have complete control over your environment because God has given you that authority. So, if people are being inconsistent, you have to really decide that you're only going to deal with them on your own terms. I'm going to say this to you, and I want you to really stop dealing with those who are inconsistent. Deal with them on your own terms, but you got to take your emotions out of the equation because your emotions become inflamed. When your emotions become inflamed, it doesn't make you angry. You're not going to lash out at them, but it will disrupt your peace. And the one thing that we want to accomplish in our life is to have perfect peace. Not just peace that surpasses all understanding, but perfect peace in our lives. This segment of the broadcast is brought to you by Under Armour Golf. Under Armour Golf is a sponsor of our annual golf tournament. They have everything that we could possibly need. If you're a golfer like myself, go to Under Armour, type in the search bar the word golf, and you will see everything that Under Armour has to offer. And of course, you go to underarmour.com. They have all the athletic gear that you could possibly need, but we thank them for being our sponsor of 3D, the Daily Divine Direction broadcast. I'm going to address another communication that came in from one of our listeners and viewers who indicated that you are really committed to self-improvement personally, professionally, and spiritually. So let me say this to you. That's a positive thing, that you've gotten to the place that you are really committed to self-improvement. Because we all, look, the Bible says, let a man examine himself. We all should be examining ourselves, determining what we can improve in our lives. And when you say personally, professionally, and spiritually, that covers every aspect of our lives. Those three things represent three things to me. They represent God our Father, Jesus Christ our Lord, and the Holy Spirit. So let's think about exactly what that requires of us. And it requires, and I'm not going to get ahead of myself because Sunday sermon, you don't want to miss any of this, so make certain that you tune in Sunday at New Life Christian Center, 400 Hillcrest Avenue in Wilmington, Delaware, 19809. Service begins at 10 a.m. Our Sunday sermon goes live on Facebook, YouTube, and RadioFreeNetwork.com. You don't want, at 10:45 a.m., you don't want to miss this because really, we're going to be talking about salvation, repentance. We're going to talk about deliverance, and we're going to talk about sanctification because people have misunderstood these examples, these terms for so long. But God woke me up this morning and spoke to me those. I literally had to get out of bed before my morning prayer and write down those four things. We've got to renew our mind, focus on our careers, meditate upon the word. Those three things are going to allow us to improve ourselves, which then will allow us to begin to experience the success that God has appointed for our lives, and then we can learn to maximize that success, and then enter into the fullness of God, and then finally learn to maximize our success, to maximize the fullness of God, to generation unto generation. So I really want to say to you, the fact that you really want to improve yourself, because you can't improve other people, but you can help other people to understand the necessity to improve for self-improvement. But when we identify that we're committed to self-improvement, that means that we're not going to waver, we're going to stay the course, and we're going to personally, professionally, and spiritually improve ourselves. And that's the beginning of the battle, and I'm going to tell you the reason why. Because most people don't live their lives to improve personally, professionally, and spiritually. So the fact that you've identified that is the beginning of the battle, but the battle's already won. So let me first say this. Focus on renewing the mind. So what does that look like for us when we renew the mind? We have to make decisions about what we can do to change our behavior. Okay, so we've got to understand that we've all developed some behavioral traits. And then we have to say, once we identify those behavioral traits, we have to determine how we're going to change those traits that are not, first of all, pleasing unto God, but second of all, are not allowing us to be the best version of ourselves that we can possibly become. So we're identifying all of these traits. And then we say, okay, I'm going to make these changes, these necessary changes. I'm going to do things differently that are going to allow me to become a better version of me. That's all part of renewing the mind. And then we have to say, okay, I haven't been the best version of myself in my career. So we have to say, what changes can we make in our professional environment to be a better version of ourselves? And the way that we do that is constantly examining where we are right now and what we desire to become professionally. Now, I'm not talking about waking up in the morning after you've been in whatever sector of business you've been in and deciding, today I want to become a brain surgeon, so I'm going to go down to the hospital and I'm going to do brain surgery. No, that's not realistic. What I'm talking about is focusing on where we are right now in our career and how we can improve even the smallest of details. Because the Bible told us it's the little foxes that spoil the whole vine. In other words, it's the details. You know, there's an old adage in the world that says the devil's in the details. You know, we've got to recognize that we can do little things every day that will allow us to improve in our career. But it begins with our focus. So we follow one course until successful. That's an acronym for focus. So those little things we do every single day are going to allow us to become a better version of ourselves professionally. And then spiritually, look, I can sit here and preach a whole sermon on how we can improve spiritually, but it all begins with meditating upon the Word. It all begins with getting in the Bible. It all begins right there, because everything we need is right inside. Everything we need is confined in. Look, I realize, you know, in theology there's some other books that have been written. I often go to the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. Before COVID, I would go, and, you know, if I didn't have a lunch meeting and I had to be in New York for whatever business activity, I would go over there and read, because there's so much information that I could study. And the reality is, the more we study, the better we become. So think about this. I was doing it from a theological aspect, but the reality is the Holy Bible is 66 books and 1,189 chapters. If we could just focus on that, how much better could we be in our spiritual life, which then translates into our personal life? So here we go. We come full circle. Personal, professional, spiritual, which then takes us back around to our personal well-being, our personal health and wellness, our spiritual health and wellness, our professional health and wellness. They're all tied together. So for you to really be committed to self-improvement, I say, to God be the glory. because we all should be focused on improving and becoming the best version of ourselves that we can possibly become. Today's Daily Divine Direction broadcast has been brought to you by Fiji Water. A taste of paradise will be delivered right to your front door when you subscribe for delivery, and you'll save money at FijiWater.com. And remember, today is Hydration Day, so you don't want to miss these electrolytes that are in Fiji Water, Earth's finest water, at FijiWater.com. May God bless you today. May God keep his face turned towards you. May God give you peace that surpasses all understanding. Have a